So I'm going to be speaking to you about the creative process and how teaching art to children have informed my life and my career. Now, you're probably already thinking about the likes of Elizabeth Gilbert and Sir Ken Robinson, and then you're also asking yourself, what could this lady possibly have to add to this conversation? Now, I could let this tremendous sense of reckoning knock the wind out of me. However, I could also use this very apt opportunity, because somebody has let me up on this stage, to talk to you about the fear of failure and living up to expectations. I'm sure you've all experienced it, right? That nervous feeling in the innards of your gut. I'm not good enough. I'm an imposter. I am going to make a fool of myself. And you probably noticed how carefully I came up the stairs. And I'm hoping not to trip on this cushy carpet. So, today, I want to actually flip this perspective and turn failure into not something that we accept, but actually something to strive for, to look forward to in its glorious humor, in its ability to show our vulnerabilities, and in allowing for the discovery of something new and unexpected. Because isn't that what life, and I dare say art as well, of course, are all about? So at this point, I guess I should introduce myself, but I almost kind of missed the boat on that one already. I'm a university educator. I built and am current area chair of the digital and integrated practice area in the Department of Art and Art History here at the University of Saskatchewan. My name is Lisa Birke. Now, I think that this is pretty funny, not my name, but the fact that I teach digital media, because about 12 years ago, I was a complete Luddite and terrified of digital technology. I had a painting studio in Vancouver, didn't have a cell phone, but I did have a pager, and when I got dinged, I would run across the street to use the payphone if I felt it was worth my time and the value of the quarter. And I'm sure some of you are young enough to also know these modern communication methods that we used to deal with. My first quote-unquote real job was teaching art to children, and I'd like to take you into my class of 3 to 4-year-olds now. And the first thing that one notices with the youngsters is that they are absolutely fascinated by the process. You can watch them and they squeeze the clay and it squishes out from between their fingers, which is really satisfying. They love the dangerous and destructive mechanisms of scissors and the conversely reparative stickiness of glue, and the endlessly fascinating variety of poo brown that you can get when mixing all of the colors together. Now, kids of this age are not concerned about the outcome and thus create something that's fresh, creative, wonderful, and spontaneous that's usually the envy of more seasoned artists. So let's get back to a particular young gentleman and a particularly gorgeous painting. But when I made my way around the room again, much to my initial horror, the painting was now a solid wall of sloshed on black paint. When I carefully asked him what had happened to his painting, he initially was a little bit hesitant, but then said in a wonderfully reassured and somewhat cheeky voice, "It's okay. The painting is just hiding." Now, let's jump over into my class of 10 to 12-year-olds and a young artist sitting staring indignantly at a drawing barely started. It doesn't look right. It doesn't look like it's supposed to. So the question I ask is, who's decided how something is supposed to look and how something is supposed to be? And I saw this over and over again. And what I was witnessing was the very sad slide into self-awareness, self-judgment, and an attempt to what I will call the expectation ring. It's a type of boxing ring that will inevitably offer you painful artistic knockout blow at the expense of fitting into a perceived system. And I saw this slide usually around the age of 11 and 12. These students sometimes gave up making art altogether, or they would simply lie immobile, playing dead, if you will, in the middle of the ring once they had been dealt that initial blow. So from unabashed joy and conceptual art way beyond their years at age 3 to self-loathing, disillusionment, and unconsciousness at age 12. So what is failure? The Oxford Online Dictionary describes one aspect of failure as the omission of expected or required action, a lack or a deficiency of a desirable quality. So I'm going to flip this again. Desired by whom? Expected by whom? Art is all about challenging the status quo and allowing us to see the world in unique ways. So what if we do not just accept failure, but actually look forward to it and enjoy it as a form of freedom? Our young artist painting from his Black series was a type of failure because it was not an aesthetically focused object that would be admired on the mantle. However, the Black painting does something else. It makes us think. It is dark, literally as well as figuratively. It questions our mortality in its additive erasure, and it is simultaneously clever and funny. The hiding painting is also endlessly malleable in our mind's eye. We can imagine it to be whatever we want it to be. Thus, it has endless potential. And importantly, the child was actually thrilled with their work. And when was the last time that we adults can say that we have felt that about our own work? So back to the system. I have been trolled repeatedly that I pack too much stuff into everything, too much stuff in my art, too much talking in my lectures, a mess, and I hope really a little bit of an organized mess of images, words, and ideas. Society prefers things more orderly, more systematic, easy to digest and understand, I think to give us a sense of security. We're on the right path, we know where we're going, things are in control, we got this. From an early age, we're taught how to fit into the system, when to sleep, when to eat, how to think, what to wear, how to behave. And of course, this is absolutely essential to our living healthy and respectful, conscientious, and also plugged-in lives. But it can also be detrimental to the creative process because it leads to a certain sameness. I see this with my students in my digital media classes all the time. They make art in a certain way, mimicking and reflecting what they see in social media and in popular culture. The desire for order and wanting to fit into a system is, it seems to me, a uniquely human convention. The universe, the way that I see it, is not like this. The universe is wonderfully chaotic and complex, and it's challenging and it's hard. As the popular proverbial saying goes, that I've adjusted just slightly for today, Pooh Brown happens again and again. So this is what this looks like for me. I make video art. I have to drag myself out of bed ridiculously early in the morning to try to catch that magic hour of light that happens right after the break of dawn. I peek out the window, and if the weather's not quite right, I get to go back to sleep. And at that point, I'm usually always really hoping that the weather is not quite right. However, if it's go time, I have to prepare my gear, do my makeup, my hair, get into costume, often put my winter gear on top of that. And then I have to trudge to location, and I have to hurry at this point because I probably didn't manage to get up as early as I'd hoped. And then I have to go to location trudging with my gear, as you can see here, camera, tripod, green screens, and props, which have included a giant inflatable swan, 20 feet of red carpet, a garden umbrella turned giant rain funnel, and a giant pair of soft ovaries. But that's another story for another day. Then I have to figure in the wind, mosquitoes, freezing water, which I've fallen into sometimes on purpose, and snow, and sometimes even rogue wildlife that will pop up out of nowhere and surprise me. So what could possibly go wrong? So why set myself up for failure like this? I could create my video work on a controlled set, with crew, with everything set up to go smoothly. However, I found that working at the edge of failure actually makes the work more human, more relatable, and way more interesting than if I were to play it safe. And it also allows for a sense of accomplishment if things actually do kind of work out in the end. As an example, in this 360-degree video work, The Land of Milk and Honey, a green screen that fell over mid-shot became the impetus to create a utopian space that is literally falling apart at the seams to create a more interesting conceptual nuance. a pie-in-the-face contraption constructed of a rake with a pie at the end, and the idea was that I would step on the end of the rake and it would send an endless assortment of pies in my face. And of course, there's a reason for this. It was meant to serve as a metaphor for these self-destructive cycles that we all get into. I'm sure you've all know these that are really hard to break. And suffice it to say, the idea didn't really work out as planned. It's actually really hard. Pies are really heavy, and they kept missing me, and I ended up wasting about 20 handmade pies. However, the video capture of the pies flying through the air was actually really fun and led me to create a hole in the sky of my work that had a series of these pies and cakes raining down out of it, and ended up working out quite well. So in my way, my work is constructed out of a series of failures, which I think of as my happy flails, and which always lead me to someplace new. Despite my work being a pain in the butt to make, literally, I try to remember to revel in the process. And I try to remember what I have learned from the children, to play with the materials in front of me and actually have a good time when I'm poking at the world and watch what happens in the process. And I'll usually give everything a shot, even if probably especially if I'm feeling rather nervous about the whole thing. I now accept failure as something that I actually want. Without it, I'm not doing something right. And why, in the end, is confronting failure through creativity and art important? Art questions, and it keeps the world in check. It makes sense of our experiences, but it also points to the wonders of life and living. It elevates our experience and allows us to move into the future with self-awareness, accountability, and a new perspective. It also takes the pressure off and makes the process much more fun when we're allowed to laugh at the cheekiness of failure. It's a joyful and freeing space. And art, music, dance, these things all inspire us to live in the moment as well as to do better in the world. So I encourage you to keep a place in your heart for the spirit of the hiding painting, and try your best not to fall into the trap of the terrible 12s. Dance, and dare I say, tango with failure rather than letting it knock you down. So for me, I know I'm on track if I find myself in an aisle at the Canadian Tire, stepping on the back of an assortment of rakes, seeing which one is properly engineered to send a pie in my face. For you, this might look entirely different. Thank you.